A couple of videos ago, I mentioned how low-key I was a little bit sad that Hokuzono went the route of allowing the good guys to prevail and have their moment. And I might have spoken a little bit too soon, because Kagurabachi Chapter 57 just hit us with a disgustingly wild plot twist I just simply wasn't expecting, and it came out of nowhere. So, let's talk about it.
Sometimes you gotta close the door to open a window.
Before we get into the video, I just want to ask if you would all like and subscribe. It really means a lot. And if you want, you can consider supporting me on Patreon, because it would help support the channel, and it also allows me to make bigger and better content for you guys. Appreciate you. But this chapter absolutely and certainly threw me, and I'm sure many of you, through a loop here. But first of all, little detail that I noticed here was how the sword hovering above Chihiro and Hirohiko here served as a sort of dramatic timer / countdown of sorts for the big reveal that was going on within the chapter. Something I've been paying attention to quite a lot recently in my manga reading is the framing of the artwork and how the author is portraying it and really trying to soak in the hidden meaning behind it, if there is one at all. For example, this chapter was just tense and full of what felt like victory moments, but in the back of our mind we're aware of that sword that was just looming, almost as if it's like an executioner's blade just waiting, and once it falls, so too does Yoji, or at least that's what it seems to be in that way anyway. But you see, this chapter here, it's filled with double edges, double entendres of all the words that are being said. The first half serves to show you the aftermath of Samura's blitz on the goons who were attacking the temple here, with everybody absolutely just stun-locked and wondering what the hell just happened. And one of Samura's guards here introduces us to the official enchanter blade Tobimune, and again, I want to point out that the aesthetic of the blade that Samura has, and given the implication within this chapter here, these black feathers, they certainly seem to fit the theme of death, like almost like crow's feathers, vulture's feathers. It's just normally seems to be like white feather symbolizes life, black feather symbolizes death. That's just sort of how it feels. But Mr. Hat Hishaku here leaves saying how, I wonder how this is going to rile up the battlefield, and saying how he wonders if he's in trouble now, because I'm assuming that the original plan here for Hirohiko was for him to have a hold of Tobimune rather than the other sword here, or no, rather than the Kumiure. I guess we'll see what's going on here. But again, as I mentioned before, almost everything that is said in this chapter between Samura and the Hishaku can be left open to interpretation about whether they're lying or telling the truth at that moment, and it's not until the end of the chapter that you realise that they're all bluffing. Hokuzono genuinely, he was in his bag for this particular chapter here, but there is a certain focus on the death of comrades who had fought alongside Samura and Yoji here, with Samura thinking back to a conversation with Yoji where he tells him, as bearers of the enchanted blades, our lives are gravely consequential. With a pained look on his face, Samura tells everyone that this is just the start, and this is where we get the title card for a chapter. And again, these lines here with him saying this is just the start, by the time we reach the end of the chapter, they serve a very, very different meaning. If you go back and reread this chapter, by the time you get to the end of it, everything, you kind of like, ooh. But anyway, we switch back over to Hirohiko here, and he manages to achieve his goal that he set himself a couple of chapters back, and that was to rile up Chihiro's mental state. Now, Hirohiko achieves this by simply just spilling the plans of the Hishaku in a manner that forces Chihiro to think long and hard about who is truly in control of the current situation. And again, as I mentioned before, I've been paying close attention to the framing of panels recently when I've been reading manga, and I noticed how every panel featuring Chihiro and Hirohiko in this chapter is shown from the perspective of Chihiro looking down upon Hirohiko, a lower down shot of him to make him seem more imposing and in control, right up until the final panels where he's given minimal space and Hirohiko absolutely dominates the panels to convey to us just how much that the events have just flip-flopped up, down, sideways on their head. And Hokuzono even used a shot of a teacher in a school, and realistically that is exactly what is happening with Chihiro right now. He's in school being taught the brutality of the plan that the Hishaku conjured up, and he is embroiled with. He has no control in it. He is literally just a student facing the teacher right now. The parallels and the drawing, spicy for me. I love it. But Hirohiko's speech here makes Chihiro not only doubt himself, but also Samura, and finally, his dad. The doubts Chihiro had about what his father had taught him about the Shinoichi are now just starting to bubble up to the surface, and we're wondering just what it is that his dad didn't tell him, what it was that his dad has created, the kind of power that he let loose on the world, and how that power made Samura want to kill the contracted blade bearers, seemingly, and even potentially want to gouge his own eyes out. Now here, Hirohiko lets slip a vital piece of information here, that Samura had made a pact with Yura 3 years ago. Now, 3 years ago just so happens to be coincidentally when Chihiro's dad was murdered. Now, when we saw him murdered, there was 3 assailants there all standing there. An unnamed woman, Mr. Hatishaku, and someone who looks to be in traditional samurai garb here. Now, if what Hirohiko says is true, then it's highly likely Samura might be involved in the death of Chihiro here. Now, given the evidence shown within the chapter, we know multiple things. Samura has a disdain for these blades themselves, the death that they've caused and the horrors that they've committed. He doesn't consider himself a hero, and he more than likely believes that the world would just be better off without these blades. If you think about that flashback that he has with Chihiro and them talking about these horrors, probably thinks the world is definitely better off without these blades. Or at the very least, he would like to remove the source of the creation of those blades. That source being Kunishiki Rokuhira. Now, as all of this information is flying through Chihiro's head here, all of this is happening as the sword above finally drops. And it's from this point, the framing within the panels is no longer of Chihiro drawn from a perspective of someone looking up at him to show him being imposing, but instead from a wider, larger, more establishing shot to emphasize that the battlefield is now just completely a lot more equal, with Chihiro and Hirohiko level next to the sword, until finally Hirohiko breaks free from Chihiro's foothold and seizes control of the enchanted blade Kumiyori. Now, one detail that I did notice in here, this was my favourite panel within the chapter, was how Hirohiko, as he's drawing that blade, the origami butterflies of Hirohiko's sorcery, they all start to fall, signifying the loss of Hirohiko's sorcery, but also the emergence of him now being a contracted owner of the Kumiyori blade itself, which, as I'm sure you've guessed it, means Yoji must have been felled in order for this to happen, because he can't enter into a contract with the enchanted blade while the previous owner is still alive. So it's more than likely that Yoji has now been officially killed. But as for how that could have happened, or who did this, I would be willing to bet it's either one of the two. Mr. Hatishaku has left, disappeared, and maybe assassinated him, who knows, or worst case scenario, it's Mr. Samura. And given everything that we've learned within this chapter, I would be willing to bet that it is Mr. Samura who did this. And what's even more interesting is that Hirohiko somewhat sort of foreshadowed this event like a couple of chapters ago about how it would be bad for Chihiro to leave Yoji alone a couple of chapters back, and that's kind of just rough in and of itself. But not only all of this is happening, but as the blade of Kumiyori is activated, bubbles of Hakuri's storehouse start to appear around Chihiro, meaning he's either about to be called back or someone is about to come running to him right now. And I have to say, Hogazono really pulled a fast one on me, and I'm sure many others. I genuinely wasn't expecting this development. I was actually kind of just expecting another victory for the good guys here, but that is not the kind of manga that we're reading here, apparently. So it caught me a lot off guard, and it's genuinely a really fucking good chapter, a beautiful chapter, and I am genuinely, truly looking forward to seeing where all of this goes next. But that is everything from me. As always, if you've not already, please be sure to like and subscribe, and also consider supporting me on Patreon. As I mentioned before, it helps support the channel greatly and allows me to make bigger and better content and videos for you guys. But as always, I will catch you guys all in the next one. Much fucking love, big fucking kisses, peace.